have you ever been to a social gathering, such as a barbecue or a party, where you're introduced to somebody new? And as you're having a conversation with this person, you kind of get the feeling that they're not really listening to you. Maybe the opposite is also true. How many times have you listened to somebody and after a while finds that your brain starts to wander a little bit? Maybe you're thinking about the next question to ask this person. Or you're wondering about that email you got earlier and thinking, how do I respond to that email? Maybe you've even recognized somebody else at the party and you're thinking, how do I excuse myself from this conversation to go and talk to the other person? Now, I'm so sure that most of us have been in one of these two situations before, right? Either where we're not listening or we're not being listened to. So, tell me this then. Why is it that we are concentrating on listening? Did you know that within either one of these situations, it's nothing to be embarrassed about because it's not really your fault? You see, from a young age, we have been taught how to talk, but not how to listen. And I'm afraid your mum's standing there wagging a finger at you saying, now listen to me. That doesn't really count. We have been taught how to say words, put them together to form sentences. We have been taught how to read and write, but not how to listen. And then we automatically feel that by going to school and reading how to learn and write, we would learn how to listen. But listening requires a different set of skills altogether. And it starts with your concentration. Concentrating while listening is a greater challenge than concentrating through any other form of personal communication. As a business coach, I very quickly learned the value of listening to people instead of just giving advice. A few years ago, I was contacted by a lady in Cape Town, South Africa, asking for some help to sell more of her products. Now we got on a call and it quickly became clear that she wasn't really that passionate about selling her products. So I asked her, what is it that you really want to do? What is it that you're really passionate about? After a few seconds of silence, she said, I don't know. Maybe there's something out there for me, but I don't know what it is. So we continued the conversation and I listened. 12 months later, out of the blue, I received an email from her saying that she's got something really exciting to share with me. Of course, I was very curious, so I immediately gave her a call. And she started by sharing what's been happening in these last 12 months. She basically went on to start a foundation right there in Cape Town, South Africa. And this foundation was geared towards young women and girls, no matter from what their backgrounds, they were there to help and support them. They were just teaching them certain skills, like how to use a computer, bake bread, make soap. They were starting to just distribute sanitary ware, teaching the girls about menstrual hygiene. And no matter what the background of these girls, their social status, income levels, or ethnicity, they were bringing these girls together so that they can learn to become the best versions of themselves. Now, when she shared the story with me, I was gobsmacked. In 12 months, she's achieved this all by herself. But the most important thing, she finally found that one thing she was so passionate about. After our conversation, I sat back and I contemplated one thing she said in particular. She said, "Thank you for listening to me 12 months ago." Now, why am I sharing this story here with you today? Did you know that adults actually spend an average of 70% of their time in some form of communication? 30% of our time, we don't communicate. But of that 70%, 45% of our time we spend listening. Only 30% is spent on speaking. And then, of course, 16% on reading and the last 9% on writing. Now, this puts a few things into perspective, doesn't it? So, why is it that concentrating while listening to somebody else is such a challenge for us? As humans, we think a lot faster than we speak. The average rate of speech for most people is between 110 and 150 words per minute. Now, this is a very slow-going rate for our human brains, which is made up of over 100 billion neurons, and it works in such a complicated yet efficient manner that it even makes the world's most modern digital computers seem slow. So in the act of listening, we're asking our brains to receive words in at a very slow rate compared to its capabilities. Think about it this way. It's as if we're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is saying that she's going to explain to us now in detail how to eat an apple. Now, I don't know about you, but by the time she's done explaining that process to me, my apple is gone, completely devoured. And the same applies for your brain. While you're listening to somebody else speaking, your brain can also make up additional words to those that you hear. So in the act of listening, basically, we can listen and we still have some spare time for thinking. The power of stories come in play here. While we listen to stories, our brain can fill in the blank with imagination. At the age of 19, I was very fortunate to work as an au pair in the USA for 12 months. I worked for this incredible family with 2 beautiful little girls, and I felt like I almost instantly became part of the family. Now, on some weekends, the grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins would come and visit, and with them, they would bring their great-grandmother, Lizzie. Lizzie, being in her mid to late 80s, would come and sit in this big armchair in the living room, and she would watch the great-grandchildren play around her. Now, for me, as the au pair, while I would sit there and enjoy the children and entertain them, we had a few conversations. Lizzie would start by sharing some stories of her youth, stories of how she came to the US from Ireland, her experiences, her challenges. And right there and then, I got taken back into a time that I've never experienced before. Yes, I could see it on TV and on movies, but this was real. And as for Lizzie, while she would share these stories with me, she would relive some of those moments. You would see it on her face. She would laugh, she would smile, she would frown. At the end of the day, when it was time to go home, she would take my hand and say, "Thank you for listening to this old lady today." At the age of 19, I had no advice, experience, or wisdom to share with Lizzie. All I could do was listen. And you know what? I wanted to listen because through her stories alone, I learned so much. And I will take that with me for the rest of my life. Now, you might be sitting here maybe thinking of your grandparents, maybe even your parents. Have you ever asked them to share stories of their youth, of their experiences? But equally, would you be able just to sit and listen? You see, there are 4 common mistakes we automatically make when we listen. And I want to share these mistakes with you here today so that you can become consciously aware of what they are and start working on your listening skills. So the first mistake we make is as the listener, while we listen to somebody else talk, our brain runs ahead, and in most cases, we want to finish people's sentences. Very often this is true, especially if the speaker talks slowly. The second mistake we make, again, as the listener, while we listen to somebody else talk, our brain runs ahead and we come up with our own conclusions, sitting there waiting to offer our advice. The third mistake we make is sometimes when things are being said, we don't agree with it, we can personalize it and even become a little bit defensive. And this is something you would most likely see in relationships or even in working environments. And this is where miscommunication starts. The fourth mistake we make, while we listen to somebody else talk, we are also looking for the non-verbal communication. Now, these are things such as gestures, facial expressions, tone of voice, and we use this to add meaning to the spoken words. But at the same time, while we're looking for this, we tend to get visually distracted by our surroundings, meaning that now we are no longer paying attention to the person in front of us. So how does this apply then to you? How many times have you tapped into one of these four mistakes, maybe without even knowing it? Now, if you know what these four mistakes are and you can start working on your listening skills, what about our children? As I said earlier on, we learn from a young age how to talk, but not how to listen. So how can we teach our children to listen with the right intention? Have you ever listened to toddlers talk? It's fascinating. It's magical. Their imaginations hold no boundaries. And then when they turn into teenagers, well, thank goodness, they don't want to talk to mum and dad anymore, right? That's not the case. You see, most teenagers are just scared of being judged. But it is up to us as parents to create that safe space, that environment for our children to talk freely. And it's up to us to sit there and listen to them without tapping into any one of those four mistakes. We can lead by example. The problem is, we can also very quickly get this wrong. Personally, for me, when I learned about these four mistakes, I wanted to utilize my personal skills through my network. I wanted to enhance my listening skills. And the best way to do this by sitting and asking people questions, having conversations, but just listening. So I started by asking people questions, such as, what made you decide to start this business? Or, why did you change career? Why take on this challenge? And as they share their words, their stories, I would take in the words of this incredible opportunity that they never even thought was possible. Sometimes they would look towards the sky and just be telling me what's actually on their mind. In other cases, they would really put their head in their hands and say, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. You see, at the end of the day, people don't just talk to get advice unless they ask for it. They talk to get things off their chest. Whether it's your family member, spouse, friend, or even your child, would you be able to sit there and listen for the duration of that conversation? And would you be able to just create that environment for them where they can feel heard? We live in a world where we're looking for grand solutions to global issues. Yet, we have the power right here, right today, to start creating tiny little ripples through our ears. And by starting with those tiny little ripples, which then can become waves, there are 5 steps that we need to practice. And I want to share these 5 steps with you because you've got to practice this every day to enhance your listening skills. It's like going to the gym. You've got to exercise the muscle, right? So the first step is this. When you're having a conversation with somebody and you're listening to them, make eye contact. Now, please don't stare at them in a weird way. Don't freak them out. But by making eye contact, it actually means that you're staying focused and you're paying attention to them. And you know what? They will feel it too. They will feel that you are there with them in that moment. The next thing to remember is people need to speak freely. Don't finish their sentences and don't interrupt them. The fourth thing, it's going to be a tough one, don't judge people. Now, you might not be saying it out loud, but you could be thinking it. Remember, it's not your place to do so. And then the final step, this is the tricky one again. Do not personalize what is being said, and please do not be defensive. It's about how you react in that conversation that counts. We hold the power to shape destinies, elevate dreams, and instigate positive change, not just for others, but for ourselves. We can unlock the key to motivating and uplifting those around us by understanding the psychology behind creating impactful conversations through listening. I hope that from here, the power of everyday conversations will inspire you to embrace the profound influence you wield through your listening skills. And with that said, choose your conversations well. Thank you.